body analysis, facial analysis, how this affects people in their daily lives, how it may affect the way that you interact with people. These are some of the topics I'm going to be diving into today with expert Tammy Cho. She is another fellow Canadian, and I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. If you've ever wondered how face and body analysis can affect you in your business as a leader, and so much more. So, Tammy, welcome to Mindset Medicine. I'm really happy to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me here, Catherine.
So, I was really intrigued when I saw what it is that you focus on, and I know that you have many different topics that you focus on. But we're going to start the conversation by talking about what drew you to body and facial analysis? Because it's not a typical topic that we find a lot of people dive into and focus on in their businesses. So, what drew you to it?
A big part of it really honestly was my own journey. I actually worked as a nurse for 20 years, and on that journey, I essentially, one day I went to work and I experienced chest pain and heart palpitations where it radiated up my jaw and down my arm, and I was just struggling to focus and concentrate and all of these things, and I ended up being wheeled off to emergency in front of everyone at work. And leading up to that point, I knew I wasn't really doing well, but I couldn't really emotionally let go. And that started me on this whole journey of, really, focusing on the mindset and on the mind and NLP and lots of personal development and all of these kind of things. And it it really didn't, meet the challenge I was at. I had to like dive deeper, and really, the burnout slowed me down. But it
So,
really wasn't
so
until
did you have burnout from a job you had been doing? Was it what was going on in your life that things sort of escalated to that point?
yeah, sure. Yeah, it was essentially basically putting everyone before myself. It was being that high performing, high achiever, you know, giving too much of myself, all those kind of pieces that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into, right? Of, really always meeting the next KPI numbers and things like that, right? And that started for me in nursing, but I believe a lot of these patterns play out very similarly. And at that point, it's like, how many times do we know what the right thing to do, but and then we don't allow ourselves to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was essentially what was playing out for myself. And there was a place where that slowed me down. We always hear about as CEOs, we need to slow down to really see the bigger picture,
Mm-hmm.
the power of the pause, and all these things, right? And so that burnout really slowed me down, but it really, I didn't, have my turning point um, per se until I had my first 6-month-old daughter, and she was lying there in one of those baby Einstein mats. And for the very first time, she hit one of the hanging toys. And if it wasn't for this community nurse that was sitting next to me in my living room, I wouldn't have even, connected to the fact that I wasn't happy. I was really disconnected, and I couldn't feel any joy in my daughter doing this really cute thing for the first time. And so this was a big part of my whole journey of trying to, heal myself. And I went in energy healing modalities, and I pulled into 4 years of emotional and spiritual healing. And I speak about this because back then I was treating all these places in silo, and until I was able to bring it all together through something called psychosomatic therapy,
Mm-hmm.
which is a study of the body, mind, heart, soul together, as it's expressed through our physical features, like what's showing up on the face. And I saw on my body that I was, yearning for all this love and connection, but a part of me was pushing it away. And that's actually a very common pattern I see when I work with a lot of high achieving, impact driven entrepreneurs and leaders, is that there's a place within themselves that what they say they want versus what they're actually allowing themselves to receive or let in energetically is very, very different. And this is painted for us to see really literally through our embodiment in our body.
Mm.
And so that's how it sort of came full circle for me. I was really on my healing journey. And as I was a nurse and now entrepreneur, and very much, I'm almost bringing the two together. Because in many ways, if we are burned out, stressed, and overwhelmed regularly, we're not really living up to our full potential in our authentic leadership. And so that's a big part of, what I'm supporting people through now, So yeah, please, I know, I'm sure there's stuff that,
Yeah,
is
no,
flagging in
so
your
so
mind
it's
to ask.
interesting that in an effort to help yourself, you realized, and I find that this is where a lot of entrepreneurs come up with their motivation for their businesses. It starts with a pain point that they wanted to solve for themselves, and then kind of looked around and said, you know what? I think this could work for other people too. Who else can I help, make an impact on?
Yes, it's very true, right? We all have that story in business. We all always talk about telling our story and things like this. And it's very true. Like, it's like when things get tough in business, we need to fall back on that powerful why. And
Mm,
I think that's the piece that, drives me to do what I do. And I'm sure you have yours as well. And this is the piece, but sometimes when we allow the pain, initially it's really good, right? The pain will motivate us to do all these things. But eventually, if we're not healing that, pain in the sense of, expressing it through a more transformed way, not with pain, but to the fact of the impact we could create from it with a more loving energy, oftentimes that recreates more of a similar energy of pain. And I
mm.
think a lot of people don't realize that is that as we transform in the inner world, it's directly reflecting and creating what we're able to create in the outside world.
So here's what I find fascinating about body and facial analysis is that so many of us, probably most of us, don't realize that our face betrays us before our words do. And I find, when you're watching someone, their face will show what's going on inside, unless they're, a poker face. And the same with their body and their movements and so on. So I'd love if you could sort of go into a little bit of why choose that? Where did that come up for you? And
Mhm.
what have you uncovered as you've learned more and more about facial and body analysis, and maybe bring it into the entrepreneurial world or the leadership world and how that all works together?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because, yes, a lot of times people make a facial expression before they actually verbally express, right? And I've also seen the alternative where there's something someone says, but their face is totally a mismatch from
Mm,
what they're actually trying to express. And so, the way I bring face analysis and body analysis to work with entrepreneurs is to really witness. Yes, you can highlight all your strengths and challenges and internal conflicts through the facial features, but one powerful thing is that, in our everyday achievement of our goals, what the face powerfully shows is where we're in and out of alignment, where we are living authentically and expressing in a way because people can feel when we're, out of sorts or we're not in alignment with what we're saying. And the face just provides this powerful way to really witness this in a tangible way. Because I know I talk about energy, and our body is really a direct representation of our energy alignment. And so, to highlight, Catherine, is the left side of our face is our private world. So, if we put our hands on the left side of our face, it's our emotional side. It's our private face, our inner pieces of us that, we may or may not be connected to. And
mm,
the right side is the public face. It's actually what we show to the world. And of course, when we're looking at a mirror, we're not really analyzing ourselves in this way and we're not looking uneven. But what I do is that, I have like clients send pictures to me and I do something called face splits where I put two left sides together and two right sides together. And I help someone journey through spaces where we can see there is something happening, how they're showing up in the outer world is not the same. It's actually quite different from the inner world. For example, having a smaller left eye and then having a bigger right eye. And of course, we're not always noticing this as some of us do, but this speaks to how much we're actually, allowing ourselves to be who we are.
mm.
And, authenticity, we talk about know, like, and trust and building that with our, customers and such. And authenticity drives, revenue in many ways because people buy from who they know, like, and trust. And it's sometimes it's an energetic thing that we're not necessarily conscious of Because when I shift this with a client, a lot of times all those pieces open up and there's definitely more abundance and flow that can happen.
Mm.
So it's very interesting in this way. It seems somewhat unrelated, but it's highly related at the same time.
Yeah. So then what comes up in my mind is, are there facial cues or body signals that would predict someone's success, that they are living up to their potential, or they are feeling like they're not holding anything back on one, as you were saying, the left side or the right side of the face? Um, are there little predictors that you can see?
It definitely shows up very differently for everyone. I think one thing that people are not aware of is that oftentimes, if we're not walking aligned to our soul's purpose, oftentimes that over time kind of drains our energy and confidence in many ways, even though we're not conscious of it. And
Mm.
so one of the ways this could show up is that, I invite the listeners, right, to look down, stand, maybe turn a few times, and just stand as you normally would and look at how you may be the placement of your feet are landing. Because oftentimes it shows us if someone is off direction with their purpose and off direction with their off direction with their purpose. And so by looking at how someone walks and stands and how you stand, it could tell you in that moment. And we want to look at patterns. Of course, it's not just a one time, but often there's a certain way we stand. And if our feet are not pointed straight, it actually shows us that we're consistently off direction. Because if you can imagine, if your feet are placed like this and you're walking over time, you're not actually getting to where you want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so psychosomatically with body analysis, that's one way to know if you're actually aligned with, what is it that you truly want to create.
Mm-hmm.
Because I meet with a lot of clients where they tell me they want this, but when we go deeper into the unraveling, it's not actually what they want. That's why they haven't created it. They're actually blocking themselves.
Interesting.
It's Yeah, so it's very interesting because a lot of us are not asked what we actually want,
Mm.
and we're used to leading with the mind. And sometimes, this is one of the negative effects of mindset sometimes, is that we try to think positive out of it. But sometimes there's a time and place for the emotions, because a lot of times what we are, affirmations don't feel aligned because we haven't addressed the emotional aspects, for example.
Mm.
And our face and body is the physical manifestation and embodiment of our thoughts and emotions, our emotional history. And what shows up on the body is essentially reflecting back to us what may be repressed and not addressed. And so it really is a holistic way of being and living, knowing that when we are not taking care of ourselves, these levels, like often we get, symptoms, signs and symptoms from the body, whether that's a physical ailment, a chronic disease, itchiness on the skin, a rash, like all that points to your inner being trying to communicate with you. So I believe true leadership, has a lot to doing with leading the subconscious in many ways, because we know 95% of our thoughts is subconscious. It's running the show, yet we're focusing on the conscious a lot of the times.
Mm.
So I think that's a beautiful way to step into our more authentic leadership, where we're actually caring about our body and
Mm-hmm.
our results.
So, what do you think is like one of the main things, like the number one thing that people seem to misunderstand about their own body language or their facial cues? Do you think that there are things that people misunderstand? Like maybe they don't realize that a certain body language is coming across a certain way to the person who's standing in front of them, but they don't realize that.
I think a big part of facial language, it's really difficult to say one small particular thing, but it's generally if someone's like there's a slight lifting of the lip, you could tell if someone is maybe not being truthful in what they're actually saying. Sometimes if you're seeing someone talking and you see their eyes kind of look up to another way, then that sort of signifies that they're not maybe telling the truth in that moment. There's things like that. For myself, I use it more of like an internal personal development of when we look in the mirror in the morning. Um, like when you are getting ready to look good for the world, like what words of judgment are coming through your mind? What are you liking about yourself? What aspects are you not liking about yourself that you're, maybe unconsciously or, under the breath, oh, I can't stand how this looks or whatever, right? And I actually, I love to offer the audience something, what your face says about, your authentic leadership, because it really brings up these pieces of where there's misalignments within ourselves, but also where our strengths are.
Mm,
And like those pieces that we're, commenting about in the morning, criticizing or loving, this speaks actually oftentimes to the block that's happening underneath. So if you're criticizing your nose, for example, right, that's a lot to do with your self-identity, who you are, your confidence level. If you're commenting on, maybe it's a particular, blemish on the face and how it's more red, right? Oftentimes that's like something happening in the moment that's causing a lot of anger and irritation, in the moment that you may not be actually addressing,
mm,
and so it's these not really facial cues per se, but there are definitely the features
mm,
and the symptoms that come and go. I think I have what I see as a pattern is a lot of people actually have their shoulders rolled forward, partly because it's our posture, we're leaning forward on the computer. But
mm,
even when we sit back, a lot of times the shoulder is actually curved in. And so there's a piece here for us that sometimes we can mindset so many things within our life, but if our body is actually holding out fear, like we literally curling up our shoulders because we're fearful of fully expressing ourselves, it's like, having, that, yummy, juicy salad, and then doing the fried chicken the next day. You know what I mean? There's like a conflict within ourselves as it's reflected in our embodiment.
mm,
So a lot of it is reading the body. And then there's actual somatic healing of connecting to the subconscious. And then there's actually embodiment and alignment of the body and how
interesting.
we walk and how we breathe.
Mm,
So it's actually a three-part process that supports us. It's not just like, because a lot of people could say, "Oh yeah, the I say this," and it becomes a more intellectual experience versus actually coming back into the body to actually feel it. And that's what is causing a lot of pain in this world, is that people are doing what makes sense versus
mm,
what maybe feels right, and they're not in the body, and therefore doubting, overthinking, perfectionism, all those kind of things that run the show.
mm. That's
Yeah.
that's really interesting, that sort of mismatch of alignment of what's actually going on inside, maybe as opposed to what you are portraying because you feel you need to, you should, or that's what's uh, acceptable in that circumstance that you feel you need to be in. I've noticed that a lot in my life, especially when you're in, um, we'll call it an uncomfortable circumstance, like you're at a conference you've never been to, right? So you're feeling uncomfortable. Inside, you feel uncomfortable, but outside, you have to show confidence. So there's this like misalignment going on between the inside and the outside, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's such a difference between confidence as we develop an external skill, or maybe speaking on stage, going to networking events, and getting comfortable with it. And there's a difference between this innate worthiness that I really don't care how exactly I show up, because I'm going to attract the right people,
Mm,
and that I feel I'm worthy no matter what happens. There's a
yeah.
difference in that, and I think that gets mixed up. It's like
Mm,
maybe authentic confidence, that you don't feel the nerves, you're not always put together, but you're saying exactly what you need, and you're putting
yeah.
out that energy resonance of pulling in the right people. So yeah, I like to, speak to that piece because sometimes people confuse that.
What would you say is the most surprising thing you have encountered ever since you've been in this realm of energy and analysis? And what is something that's really you had maybe an idea going into it, and now it's like, oh no, it's very different now.
Yeah, like one of the biggest things is doing, energy alignment assessments with people, because like first of all, I didn't think when COVID happened, I wasn't doing this online, and I didn't know if I could even do that online to measure someone's energy, but yes, you can. And I will have instances where I have someone that, I tell someone to get into the embodiment of like, this is how much money they want to make, or this is what they really want to create in their life, whatever that is. And I measure their energy field and they feel it in their body. Yet when I measure their energy, it actually closes up to it. And I do this in a way where I measure them at a very neutral level. I get them to get into a very positive energy and then a negative energy. And we measure that. So we measure according to how you react to things. And then we test it against someone's goals. And it's just quite amazing, the difference from what someone really feels like, there's no problem. I already know that I could do this, and what the energy says.
Mm,
And when I'm able to support someone to come to a place of truth within oneself, because the body doesn't lie, energy doesn't lie. So when we see that and we actually go to the core of things, that is, one big thing that, always, surprises me, it to see the amount of how much we really believe versus what is actually happening.
mm,
That always blows my mind when I see that.
yeah.
So yeah. And the other thing that pops up, because I just did a follow-up face analysis, because I do it at the beginning of the coaching and after. And like literally my clients, like placement of her eyes changed because they were actually placed not like, if you put a string there, it wasn't placed evenly. Her irises were actually not centered, they were off. And then also her eye sizes were different. And to see the after effects of doing the deeper work to really open up her confidence, in her ease and flow, and not letting life have to be like this hard struggle. It just, everything evened out. Her irises evened out, her eyes were even, her size of the eyes evened out. She just looked like an entirely different person. That's just eyes. The nose changed, the mouth changed. Yeah, it's just surprises me. I never, I believe this is nursing 2.0 or something.
Really? Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that's that is incredible. I mean, it's surprising, but it's not, because you can see that in many different, when people start to do the inner work and start to take more care of themselves and become more aware of how they're feeling, um and really who they are, not who they're supposed to be. I do find that their demeanor changes, which I guess would then evolve into the physical features then changing. That's incredible. Um, what was I was gonna ask you. Oh, yes, energy. How do you measure energy through online work? How would you do that? Is it what's coming through to you? How does that happen?
Yeah, like I essentially set the intention to measure the client's energy field, and I get them to do the same. So we, create sort of the space, energetic space. And I use measuring rods to essentially I get them to stand in front of the I guess, computer laptop. And I walk towards them and I hold it in a way where I have no control over these measuring rods. And it essentially either opens up or it closes, or it opens up one way or the other, which signifies a block in the masculine energy or the feminine energy.
Interesting.
And those are the pieces we chunk down. And before we measure the goals, we make sure, because sometimes people make affirmations that have so many pieces to it.
Mm,
I'm worthy of more money, but there's the difference between testing worthiness and money, for example,
mm,
or joy. Sometimes it's not even about the money, it's the joy. It's like I have success already. Why am I not happy?
mhm,
So I have a lot of people that are drawn to sort of the deeper work of more fulfillment with abundance, so to speak. And yeah, and it's interesting, and I'm grateful that energy doesn't lie, because yeah, it's really easy to brush things off when you can't tangibly see something wrong.
mm,
And I believe that's where, a lot of times it's mindset and strategy that we focus on. And there is a place of the non-tangible. And I'm grateful I could use the face as a more tangible way, but also the energy. So I work with someone wherever they're ready and open to,
mhm,
but definitely the more open and willing you're able to go. And oftentimes we address this worthiness level. It shifts everything in your life. It's not just one thing. It's like how you feel about yourself, affects your energy resonance and your presence of how you
Mhm.
show up authentically,
Sure.
which allows your energy to actually open and receive what you say you want. And, it doesn't make a logical sense all the time. And so this is why I want to get it out there is that let's be real with ourselves. Like let's
Mm.
like deeply love ourselves as a business strategy.
Have you noticed that you have evolved as you have been doing these teachings and seeing the results from people and how they've changed so drastically from beginning to end? I imagine that you evolve at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. I think when we're in business, we realize that we're consistently evolving at the same time as our clients. If not, we become stagnant. And I think there's a lot of business people out there that are evolved past their business. That's why there feels like there's a disconnect. And I
Hmm.
just want to speak to that because I think people are thinking it's something else that's wrong, but it's actually your personal growth got to match the external growth. And yeah, I didn't prepare it for today, but if I show you a picture of who I used to be, I literally had a darker shade of face. I literally, my eyes were really tiny and my lips were much thinner. My left side of the face was a lot more thinner than the right side of my face.
Wow.
I look like an entirely different person. And I've done many photos since then, but that was essentially when I first went out on my burnout journey. And yeah, I have a whole different resonance in the sense that I don't actually talk to any of my friends because there's just no resonance anymore. They look at me and they see me as an entirely different person. I feel like an entirely different person, and I'm actually venturing to back into nursing to just keep my license for the time being, and I am showing up like a completely different person. It's quite yeah, to the extent my manager is telling me, you could be my manager. I don't think you should be a frontline nurse. You need to go into leadership. Like, it's just like things that I'm didn't expect, but it's like very real and true. And I like to measure it by the amount of joy and fulfillment and ease I'm able to create in my life. Like to me, that freedom within myself is more important to me than anything outside of myself. Because in my 30s, I already became a millionaire, and yeah, I was still unhappy. So there's more to life than just money and the external things
Mm.
is what I've learned. And being able to love and receive my daughter and to be happy is really important to me now.
Yeah.
um so yeah, I think there's been a shift in my values. There's a shift in my body. There's a shift in my beingness and energy resonance. So yeah, so I'm really proud of who I've become, let's just say, and I've learned to fall in love with myself.
I find it well, congratulations for having that sort of self transformation that you've done. And I think it's interesting that you're able to measure it by actually going back to the same profession you were in. And I think that really is a true measurement. I've noticed that myself, even though I have done so many different things over the years. Um, I started as a teacher and educator. I still teach and educate as a coach, but then for 17 years, I've also been in real estate. And I know that I am a different person from when I started real estate. And I can do this, I know this based on uh, my reactions to things, my reactions to people and their emotions, and how I have evolved from thinking that, basically like the first probably 9 years in real estate, every time someone reacted emotionally, I would think, have I done something wrong? Right? Did I
Mhm.
do something to cause their unpleasantness? Whereas now I just say, well, that's just, they're allowed to feel what they're feeling. They may just be missing information. Perhaps they need to see what I see and they won't realize it's not as bad as they think it is. And that, I just see it so differently. It's almost like I'm this third party watching the situation and I can just chime in, but I don't get emotionally affected by it like I did. And that's why I say it's a beautiful thing when you can sort of be in the profession, have the evolution, and then go back in and say, yeah, I really am a different person.
Yeah, and I think you speak to a very crucial piece is that, a big part of what I call authentic energy leadership, this energy piece, our emotions and how we're able to lead our emotions
Mm.
has a lot to doing with, whether those emotions are moving and in flow, or we're holding it down to get through the day. And I think like what you speak about being able to be that third party and looking in speaks to, yeah, like how far you've come and how, you've been able to lead those emotions.
Mm,
So yeah, I just wanted to speak to that.
wonderful. Well, just before we wrap up, um, what is something important that you'd like to leave listeners with, or the people who are watching on YouTube, for example? What is something that maybe we haven't brought up, or maybe we didn't dive deep enough into, that you feel like people need to know this? This is one way I can leave an impact on people today.
Yeah, I believe one thing is that, oftentimes we're rushing throughout the day and we really forget to slow down. And we hear this all the time, we need to slow down. But I just invite people to explore this for themselves. And, when you have some time, maybe after you park the car and before you go into the house, to set an intention within yourself, like to discover something. And after you do that, allow yourself to close your eyes and just go into your body and just breathe and notice like what's being highlighted in your body. Like, is there a tightness that's happening? Because and to allow yourself to stay with it as long as you can to
Mm,
really uncover what is it, and to speak to these places within ourselves that's actually trying to speak to us.
mhm.
And you'll be surprised if you stay with it long enough, the answer and how it unfolds for you may blow your socks off. And that there are these pieces that are just trying to get your attention. And so I wanted to leave everyone with that, to just try that on and see what comes up. And I'm happy to hear about it if you want to reach out to me in the future.
Well, and then that was actually my next question was, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you do, or want to book a session with you, sessions? How can they find you?
Yeah, you could essentially just go to my website, pathtotheheart.com. So exactly how it sounds, like literally a walking path to the heart, back / links. And so there's opportunity to get this 5-part video series, which speaks to what your faces says about your authentic leadership, and ways to book a call with me. I do connection calls just to get a sense of where we're at, just to build that connection and to see, if there's a place to explore deeper. So all those things, my podcast, is everything is on there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This has been enlightening. It's been interesting. It's a topic that doesn't come up too often, but I think that there are many nuggets that came out of today that people will be able to use, or even look more into, do a little more research, or reach out to you. So thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Catherine.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into Mindset Medicine. If you know someone who will find today's topic interesting, might be helpful, maybe something that you feel that they need in their life, share this episode, download it, and I will see you again next time on Mindset Medicine. Bye for now.